Welcome, Nikita Burks-Hale. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Hello, hello.
That was a great audience again for you. They're excited to hear from you. Today's today's talk is with you, Nikita, and I'm going to read a quick thing, which I put postings everywhere. I hope someone saw this. It says, how do you define podcast success? Starting a podcast can be exciting at first, bringing that idea to life, excited for the opportunities that will come, then reality hits, and then it's hard to keep the podcast production and engaging content episode after episode. The podcast becomes a slog and the initial rewards start to fade. How do you know that your podcast is working for you? So that was my post I put out to talk about this. I saw you, Nikita, speak at Podfest, I think, or was it?
Yes.
That was Podfest, yes. And I really enjoyed the session. So thank you for that. And then I asked you to come and do it again. So here we are. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm excited to be here and chat a little bit about podcast success and defining it for yourself. So we're going to talk for a little bit, and we're going to open it up for some questions. Disclaimer, I have a 9-week-old and a 3-year-old, and they're both home with me today. So we may have some impromptu visitors drop it in as well. So thank you all for your patience and grace in advance. So.
That's awesome. I do also have a 3-year-old that will pop in probably also. But that's the way of the world these days, it seems like,
That's
which is nice. Everybody's so good with that now, Like I was on a business meeting a little while ago and I was giving a pitch to these 2 scientist guys and they were so stern talking to me. And then my daughter kind of came into the room and I could see her coming, but I tried to ignore her. And then her face came up into here and was looking and I just ignored her completely. And they finally cracked and they started laughing.
Yes.
But she was just like her head popped and she was watching.
Yes.
Very funny. So anyway, that's where we're going. So why don't we get started then? You want to get started? You want to pop your
I'll share my screen.
up? And of course, people who are watching, please comment and let's see, private chat, that's you and I. And oh no, yeah, that's with you. And then comments. Okay, so just type in some comments. Hi, I put in there. Okay, and then let's get started. So do you want to share your screen?
Yes, so I thought I just did, but let's see, did I not? Oh, let's click. There we go. Now we're ready. It was a me thing.
Right. Perfect. All right, and then I'm going to go away, but I will be here if you need me.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. So again, I am Nikita Burks-Hale, and we're going to chat a little bit today about defining podcast success for you. A little bit about me. I am a mother of, like I said, a 3-year-old and a 9-week-old, Adonis and Remy. I'm a podcaster. I first started my podcast, JourneyGurl Magic Podcast, back in August of 2019. It was a birthday gift to myself. Launched it. It had amazing success. I've taken a break since last summer because there was a lot going on, including me being pregnant. But that podcast really is what started me on my journey to podcasting and to being, which is the next identity, a CEO, which is I own and operate JourneyGurl Magic Productions. And it is a podcast production company that specifically provides editing and launch services for women of color. But we, of course, accept anyone, but we are specialized and focused on women of color and making sure that their voices are brought to the masses. So that is a little bit about me, a little bit about the business and the company. We'll jump right in. And then again, if you have questions, just shout them out to me because I can't see the chat. So I always like to start off with some stats. I'm about stats, information, and quotes. So you'll see that throughout the PowerPoint. But as of January of this year, there were over 1,750,000 podcasts that exist today and over 43 million podcast episodes. And this is from Podcast Insights. So what this fact and what this figure really shows is that your voice matters. There is space for you. There are millions of podcasts and growing. And so whatever dream you have, if you're just getting started out, if you had a podcast and then you gave it a break, if you are podcasting and have been doing so for years, there is space for everyone in this area. I think there is, and I will argue someone else down. But just remember that no matter what your vision is, no matter what your thoughts are, no matter what you have to say, it is needed and it is necessary. So I want to break this down with 6 keys to podcasting success. So 6 things that you need to keep in mind. And they're not the typical ones, I would say. One is to remember your why and stick to it. So that means go way back in the day if you've been podcasting for a while, or if you're new, really sit down and ask yourself, why are you doing this podcast? What is your reasoning behind it? And I love to do this activity that talks about you ask yourself why, and then you ask yourself why 3 more times. So let me pause here, tell you one quick thing that I did not say that will help shape this conversation as well. So I am one of those people. I was a life coach in my other life. I've been a massage therapist, a dancer, and so I'm a kinesthetic, heart-centered person. So I will give you stats and statistics, but I come from a mindset of you need to be the best you, and you it needs to start and end with you. So that's what this whole vibe is going to be. It's going to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say woo, but a little bit more heart-centered and not straight to the facts. It's going to make you think about what you want, not what society wants, not what they're saying is trending on Twitter or trending on Clubhouse or trending on Instagram. This is about what you want first, because at the end of the day, it starts and ends with you. So there's my disclaimer. Let's get back to number 1, which is remember your why and stick to it. So that activity that I said, when I first dropped my podcast, JourneyGurl Magic Podcast, I said, why do I want to do this podcast? Because I want to show folks that anyone can launch a podcast. Why is that important? That's important because I want everyone to feel like they can be heard. Why is that important? Because I feel like everyone has a space and a place on earth that allows them to do the things that they love. So from just starting a podcast because it sounds good or because it's something I've always wanted to do, all the way down to creating a space for people to live their magic and do what they're meant to be doing. 2 completely different levels of thinking. So really getting down to the root of your why and sticking to that. One of the biggest and easiest thing for podcasters to do is to forget why they started the podcast in the first place. They get caught up in all the sponsorships or wanting sponsorships, get caught up in paying attention to all the downloads. They just get caught up in all this outside stuff. And then a year later, 2 years later, they're like, I'm burnt out. I'm tired. It doesn't feel the same. Like you mentioned, that spark is gone. It's feeling like work. And I think that's because, again, you're forgetting why you got to it in the first place, and you're forgetting to put yourself first. So remember that why and stick to it. Number 2, do your research. Get comfortable in your niche or niche, depending on who you are. So this means whatever you are doing, get into it. I like to say, sit into it and get comfortable. So that means that if you have a podcast about trains, make it yours. You have a love and interest for trains. So let's talk about my podcast. I have a love for imperfection. That nothing is perfect. It's all about the beauty of imperfection. And so I talk about that all the time. I get down into it. I say life is imperfect and you do you and all this stuff. And that's what speaks to me. And as a result, speaks to my audience and speaks to my community. Again, if you have a podcast about trains, don't feel like you have to remove yourself and say, well, I think people only want to hear this. Research what interests you. If you are all in about trains, go all in. Talk about all the colors and all the machinery, the science behind it. Did you know that trains move at this speed? Did you know that there's this many trains left in the world compared to this number 10, 15 years ago? Go all in, because you're not trying to impress and reach the people who've never heard about trains. It'd be nice if they listen, but you're trying to talk to your people, the ones who are like, yes, did you hear about the M3947 model train that just came out? Get your niche, get your niche, surround yourself with them, and then do your research about what you love, what they love, and then find a happy medium. So getting comfortable in that. Number 3, consistency is key. Don't stop unless you need to. So consistency, this is one of the biggest things when I talk to my launch clients, that it's about finding a launch time or a time that you are putting out your podcast that feels good. So it doesn't mean that you have to do it every week. It doesn't mean that you have to do it every other week. You can do monthly, you can do every other day, but whatever you do, make sure it feels good for you first and that you're consistent with it. It's always easier to start off not as often and then start getting more often than trying to do every day, and then you get burnt out and tired, and all of a sudden you have to change it. So consistency is key. Remember, this should be something that you are doing that's a part of your life. One of my foundational things that I talk about is podcasting is not just something you do, it's a part of who you are. And so because it's a part of who you are, it should feel good. It should not add work. It should just be a part of your daily life. It should almost maybe be a release or just something you enjoy doing. And then don't stop unless you need to. Life is life. Things happen. I stopped. It's almost been a year since I stopped just because of everything that's going on in the world. And I'm an empath. I had to stop for my health. I had to stop for me just to take a breath, just to breathe, to have a kid, to adjust to this new life. But now I'm getting that want to come back. And so I stopped because I needed to. But now that that time has passed, I'm ready to start releasing episodes again. So figuring out your consistency, because it gives them, your audience, something to depend on. They're looking for the episode every Tuesday or every Wednesday. They're looking to hear you because you become not only a part of just their day, but a part of their lives. And so making sure that you're showing up for yourself first and then also showing up for others. So keeping that consistency and not feeling bad if you have to stop, because the last thing we want to be is burnout. Last thing you want to do is be sitting the night before not wanting to record a podcast, but feeling like you have to. That's not how it should be. Number 4, redefine monetization. It's more than money. This is my favorite one because there's so much talk right now about sponsorship and about monetizing the podcast, which is all well and good, but do it in a way that reflects you and feels good for you. So what does that mean? That means figuring out what success looks like for you. Let me make sure that's not number 5. Okay. Make sure I didn't put that one as number 5 because originally I did. So figuring out what success looks like for you. Is it that you're just releasing episodes consistently? Is it that you've increased your listenership by 5 or 10 people during the pandemic? Is it that you have your first sponsor? Figuring out what makes you feel good and what makes you feel successful and starting from there. And then as far as monetization, everybody wants to go for the big iTunes or for Apple or for all the big names to sponsor their podcast. When if you have a business, that should be your first sponsor. So JourneyGurl Magic Productions is the sponsor for my podcast and is a sponsor for a lot of my clients' podcasts because it's quick and easy and it doesn't cost any additional money. They're already paying me to do their editing. I'm already doing my own editing. And so they're technically JourneyGurl Magic Productions is sponsoring that podcast. So when you're going to get more sponsors, you've already got one to start with. Don't forget about yourself. And then from there, especially in this day and time, look at your audience and see what they're about. And so if my podcast, again, let's just say that I was going to do a whole season on mental health. Instead of trying to get either Talkspace or BetterHelp to try to be a sponsor, can I go to the local, maybe a local yoga studio or a local, I'm like working with the state. There's not the big state government, but one of the local places where you can get help for mental health. Asking them, would they like to be a sponsor? Is there a local store that you love that you just go for mental health, that you just go to get away from things? Is there some place that just brings you joy that helps your mental health? Think about those places. Can you ask them to be a sponsor? It doesn't have to be so strict. It doesn't have to be that you need this person with this many downloads and then they can be your sponsor. Who are the people in your community? Who are these small businesses that you can tap into? Can it be some local food trucks? How can you then make it relatable to your audience? So think about and redefine monetization for you. Again, it's more than the money. It's about success. It's about how are you engaging in your audience? How are you reaching people? And how can you reach more people? Hopefully that makes sense. Number 5, repurpose your content. One and done serves no one. So we are all in the times of doing 50 million things. Like I'm doing this presentation, but I know I'm on bided time because any day or any minute, my son's going to run out here in his diaper or my 9-week-old's going to start crying. So like even though I'm focused, I know that once I give this presentation, then I may forget half of the things that I talked about. And so that just shows that you can't just tell your audience something one time. If you do an episode talking about, what's this thing? If you do an episode talking about maybe your services, knowing that or let's just say for podcasting, talking about the ways of success, what I'm doing this presentation on, I know that I can not only just give this presentation once. In addition to that, I then may go on social media and tag a couple people, or each day highlight one of these 6 things. So for the next 6 days, highlight. I then may take number 1, number 2, and number 5 and do a blog post about it. I then from there may take and do a social media image. And then I may choose to do a Facebook Live or Instagram Live to talk about one specific thing as well. So realizing that you have to reiterate all the time, because we're going and going and going and we're forgetting. So you have to repeat. Think about your audience. Think of the world as a toddler. You can't just say it one time. Hey, go pick that up. Hey, repurpose your content. You have to say it over and over and over in many different ways. So again, one and done doesn't serve anyone. You got to repurpose it. So let's think about 5 or 6 ways that you can repurpose. You can have the initial podcast episode. Then you can do social media graphics. You can turn it into a blog. You can do a Facebook Live. You can do a 5-day challenge from it. You can do an email from it. And then maybe you can do something specific in your Facebook group. So that's like 7 different ways right there how you can repurpose one topic. And then your audience will show up every single time and say, oh, this was so helpful. Oh, I didn't think about it like that. And you may have said, I just said this 3 or 4 different times, but they're finally getting it. So don't feel like you're going to repeat yourself and people are getting get tired of hearing it. Just know, tell them again, tell them again, tell them again, because we all need reminders, especially nowadays. Number 6, choose one tangible measure of success. So this is what I was slightly talking about earlier. Set it, but don't forget it. So when you have your podcast, whether you're new launching, you've been in it forever, choose one thing for that season that's going to measure success. So is it going to be increasing your listenership? Is it going to be having that dream guest on your show? Is it going to be getting real about this particular topic that makes you nervous, but going all in about it? Choose it and then stick it somewhere where you can see it. Put it in your phone. Make it as something that you look at right before you record each time. You have to remind yourself so that you don't forget about it, so you keep challenging yourself. So when I'm getting back into podcasting, I'm really going to be focusing on bringing in some bigger dream guests, and then also talking a lot more about myself. I'm really good about talking about topics and relating to folks, but really sharing my struggles and what I've been doing this past year and how that's affected me and everything that's going on in the world. If I'm able to do that at the end of my season, then that's going to show that I've been successful. So thinking about what's successful to you, not what they're saying is successful on Instagram, not saying someone else saying that this is what success means, and if you don't reach that, then you're not successful. Again, you are defining this for yourself. It starts and ends with you. And then the bonus. So this was what you mentioned in the article and the post you did on LinkedIn today. Embracing your magic. Transform, don't conform. So this is when you start losing that spark, or you're like, what do I do now? Really buckle down and embrace why you started in the first place and what makes you special. So again, I'm all about imperfection. I'm all about reaching people where they're at. I'm a true empath, so I can feel what you're feeling and call it out, and we go down that journey together. So that is what makes me awesome. That's what attracts my clients. That's what makes me light up, when I'm able to make those connections with people. And so embracing that is what I bring to the podcast, is what I bring to the business. I don't shy away from it. I don't try to change myself to be something else. I know that this is what I'm about, transforming myself into the most imperfect being I can be, transforming all other podcasters into the best podcasting version of themselves that they can be. It's not about fitting into a box. Boxes are meant to be recycled. It's about being the best that you can be, growing and learning along the way. So embracing what makes you special, starting there and just going from it, because at the end of the day, that's what lights you up. That's what makes you special. That's what people want to hear and see and relate to. So again, a quick recap. I'm not even going to try to remember. Remember your why and stick to it. Do your research. Get comfortable in your niche. Consistency is key. Don't stop unless you really need to. Then feel free, take a break. Redefine monetization. It's more than money. Repurpose your content. One and done serves no one. And then choose one tangible measure of success. Set it, but don't forget it. And then finally, bonus, embrace your magic. Transform, don't conform. Transform, don't conform. Again, I said I'm all about quotes, so I want to end it with this. You make your mark by being true to who you are and letting that be your staple. So that's by Kat Graham. you can't make your mark with somebody else's pencil because it's just not going to be the same. You're not going to be able to hold it right because it's not yours. It's going to feel too new. It's just not going to feel authentic. And authenticity is what it's about. So make your mark by being true to who you are and letting that be what you lead with, letting that be your gift to the world, letting that be what you bring to your podcast. Okay. So before we get into chatting a little bit more and before I stop sharing my screen, if this was like your thing, if you're like, oh, I'm feeling you, like we're on the same page, feel free to reach out. Again, I do podcast editing services, podcast launch services, and strategy, really helping folks figure out what works for them. And so There's my email, there's my website and Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was great. You can leave that up there. Why don't you leave that up there?
Oh,
that way.
Okay.
Yeah. You just have to share it again. That was awesome. I love that you have so many quotes and things. I was like jotting down all these things. What was the one with the box? Don't be in a box because the boxes are for recycled.
For recycling, yeah.
For recycling.
Yes.
That's so great. And transform, don't conform.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about JourneyGurl Magic Production. So that is for women of color, correct? I mean, that you're focusing on that as your clients, or are you getting?
That's my primary audience? Yes.
Right. Excellent. That's excellent. And so tell me a little bit more about that. Like how did you get into? Why? Give me your why on that.
Right. So my why was when I released my podcast, I had so many folks, mainly women of color, saying, oh, can you please help me launch my podcast? I don't know about this tech stuff. I don't know how to do to Apple and all that. I don't think my voice matters enough to really have a podcast, but I've always wanted to have one. And so that last one really stuck with me, of folks, specifically women of color, feeling like their voices don't matter. And so we lead with your voice matters. It's time to bring it to the masses.
Awesome.
And so we do that through, again, podcast editing, podcast launch services, and podcast strategy and consulting.
Yeah, I had we did I was telling you earlier before we started recording, we used to do our meetups in downtown Oakland at the old Oakland at this shop and at the oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of the thing, but it doesn't matter. They're not in business right this moment yet because of the COVID, but I would sit there in the meetups and we would have a screen at one side of the room and the window going by, there were all these people of color and women walking by, and I looked at my room in front of me and it was all guys who looked like me, white guys, a lot of guys with neck beards and goatees. And anyway, I just thought so the next year I thought, okay, let's try and just get more people from the community in here, which has been working, but I think it's really important, but it's really happening now. I mean, 5 years ago, whatever, or even longer than that, when I first started podcasting, which was 15 years ago, it was just tech podcasts, right? That was it, just tech podcasts. So it's really evolved, and it's great that you're doing that. And I think that our community, as they find this, hopefully will reach out to you too, because we do have a lot of people of color that are wanting to do, women of color that want to do podcasts. Another thing that I thought was interesting, I don't know, I haven't told you because we just met today, basically, that I had a podcast for 10 years and I did it weekly for 10 years. And that day that I stopped doing it was the best day of my life. I mean, meaning that it was it wasn't okay. I wish I had known about seasons when I started it. I wish, because I would have done a season and then said, okay, we'll be back, take some time off. But I slogged my way through it. And the podcast suffered from that because it was just I needed to interview somebody or something. It's funny, I'm talking into this microphone. It's not even plugged in. But
we wouldn't have known if you wouldn't have said anything. So.
I know. I shouldn't have said anything. But when they're listening, if all these audio people would be like, it sounds terrible because I'm using our earbuds. Anyway, but taking a break is such a great idea. And it's such a great thing that you say that because it is so true. You just but if you have a good audience, you can tell them that. Say, hey, I need some time off. I'll be back. And then they won't take you out of their phone, or whatever they listen to. Yeah. Important. So when you're also talking a little bit about research, and I was thinking, how much time do you really spend researching? I mean, that's probably a weird question because depends on the show, but like when you were, how many hours do you think, or how much time do you put into researching? Like, I felt bad, like on these, because I'm so busy with work and I want to keep this group going, but it's just me. And so I do these interviews, but then like yesterday, today, I was like researching you, like trying to figure out, more about you. Cause I did see you at Podfest and I was like, oh, she's great. So let's get her to come talk. How much research do you do and do you do all interviews? Or do you do solo ones?
I do solo. So it's mainly solo. And then once a month I do an interview.
Yeah. Okay. Cause I did listen to one and it was a solo one. And then I was looking through the rest of them. I looked at the last one. I listened to the last one. It was really great.
Thank you. And so I like to break down that word research. So there's the formal research, which is who is that person that I like, who's the guest, what's their company, what are they about, like what have they been up to recently? And then there's just that general research of checking in with your community. Like what are they up to? What are they posting about? What do they need right now? And so if you break down what that research means to you, it can be formal, but it can also just be checking in with people around you, checking in with your listeners, see how they're doing. And when you get a feel for that, that will give you information, that will give you data to then go forward with your podcast. If everybody is like, hey, we need a break, then you can say, hey, we're all going to take a break this week. I'm going to take a break and I'm giving you permission to take a break. Mic drop, episode over. See you all next week.
Yeah.
And you've never known that if you're just head down, like, okay, I need to release episodes. But if nobody's listening to them because they can't even take a breath right now, what's the point? If you're not even feel like you're not really giving your best because you can't take a breath, again, what's the point?
Yeah, so. Totally. Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And then also the consistency thing. You said when you launch your clients, I wondered to myself, how do you launch? How are you helping your clients launch? Like, what is the launch plan? Is there a plan around it that you have kind of a boilerplate plan for your clients that when they launch? Do you have something like that? I know I kind of skipped over when you were talking about consistency, you talked a little bit about launching for clients, and it made me think, I wonder how because a lot of people are launching their, it used to be like trying to get in a new and newsworthy or whatever it is in iTunes, and then that I don't think that does anything anymore. But right. I wonder what do you do? What do you do for your clients? What's their launch like?
So it's a 90-day thing, usually in 90 days, or we work every other week and we go through like the whys, all the tech stuff, really figuring out like what you want to do for your podcast. We plan out the whole first season. We talk about like what feels good from when do you launch, or like when are you launching? When do you want your podcast to release? Like if they say, I want to do it on Mondays. Well, you just told me last week that everything in the world happens on Mondays. So are you really going to be prepared to record to launch on Mondays? Like, let's talk about what works for you. And so that's a lot of the formulating the podcast. And then when we launch, we get a launch team together. We set a goal of how many people they would like on their launch team and who are those people to them, how they can help them. And then once they launched, then we set a goal of, which is what Libsyn released, which I think the top 50% of podcasts get 150 downloads per episode. And so we always set a goal of 150 downloads, and that's it. And 9.5 times out of 10, they meet that within that first week. And I'm like, now you just go up from here. And then we talk about what now, because the launch is just the first part. It's the first part of that marathon. That's the first couple of miles where you're just getting warmed up. Now the real work starts of fitting it in, and not fitting it in like a peg, but really making your life so it all fits together so that it feels good. That podcasting always feels good. And when it doesn't, take a break. And then come back.
Yeah, great advice. The monetization stuff you talked about too was interesting because it is how are you? Like I said, I did mine for 10 years. I never had a sponsor, but I had so many referrals from that podcast. I can't even tell you. I like to tell people it bought me a house, my podcast, because it wasn't like necessarily how I used it was I had a events production company. So I did corporate events, staging, audio, visual, that kind of thing for corporations. And I would interview some meeting planner from some big pharmaceutical company, but it would be her referring me to somebody else. I'd never get the work from the person I interviewed, but you become that. I mean, for a business owner, it's such a great thing to do just for networking possibilities. And then when I went to events, I knew all these people and they knew me, which was weird. I'm sure you've experienced that. Have somebody knows your voice, or they're like, "Oh, are you?"
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, "Ugh, they know everything about me." Like, it's kind of weird. They know
Right.
because I overshare a lot too. So it's like, how do you know that? Anyway,
No, it's
yeah,
episode
yeah,
7. Got it. Okay.
yeah. So it is interesting. The more that it's more than the money is such a great.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And
It is more.
and what I've talked a lot about recently, because I've been finding myself working a lot more with business owners who are wanting to launch podcasts, is how can you use your podcast for your business? And so I have a client now who she is launching a 8-week course, like a
Nice.
mastermind course, and her
Right.
entire curriculum is her first season of her podcast. So each week they're going to listen to an episode, and then there's a series of questions and a series of discussions that are going to happen as a result of it. But she did not have to do any extra work. They're already using her podcast. She's getting more listens on her podcast.
Right.
They're getting more, they're hearing what she has to say. They're referring it to other people. And so it's one way of that's technically monetizing because she's selling this course for like $4.97 per person. And like I said, the bulk of it is listening to those different podcast episodes.
That's fantastic. That's so clever. Yeah, it is. Most people what I've read is like most people, when they make money from a podcast, is just selling their own products and services, not anything else. And that's super interesting. How she doing it now? Some of these people too. You see, like they write books and stuff, but they ask the same questions of everybody, and then they make the book like question 1, 2. And I tried to do that with my old podcast, but then it was like I didn't think anybody would ever read the book. I mean, I don't think anyone would buy this book. Who cares? Like, really? Right. I mean, I don't know. It was just the events stuff is not. I mean, it wasn't interesting enough to me to do it. So it was.
There you go.
It's funny how that goes. And then the repurposing the content, I think that was really interesting. Could you tell me those five or 6 ways again? Do you know them offhand, or do you have to look them up?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I know they're like.
Sure. We're gonna look at my hand, and it should pop up hopefully. So we had like the podcast, and then using social media graphics or quotes from it, then a blog post, and then from there a like Instagram or Facebook Live, and then there was what else could you do?
It is amazing.
Clubhouse now. I mean, you can do a whole conversation of like, oh, this was really helpful. Let's take this topic and bring it to a greater audience. Let's do a Clubhouse. That's a meetup. So
it is kind of getting fuzzy with how all this all works because it was just audio before, but now like we did this right now, and it could be repurposed. It actually is repurposed right now to Facebook and YouTube, but it could go to Periscope and a Twitter and all these places if I was willing to pay the money for it. But but it's like, but you're right. Like it's just it kind of blurs the what is a podcast and what isn't. All right, so how about community? Like with your podcast, did you find you were building a good community around JourneyGurl Magic? Was it like is that a community too that became from it?
There was. So I did have a community, a Facebook group and everything, and I backed up off of the Facebook group because it just wasn't feeling good. But it's interesting, and since I stopped, how much that community has grown.
Oh, really?
And I've still had the conversations. So the conversations I would be having on the episodes, I've just been having with the folks in my community, and I've been showing up and been doing things. And so that is a big part of everything that I do. And that's a big part of the podcasting is you have to give back to your community. And by give back, that means listening to them. Like what are they going to? Not necessarily what do they want, so I can only do what they want, but what are they needing? What feedback are they giving you? What praise are they giving you? Like what further conversations? Because a lot of the reason I think 99% of people start a podcast is because they didn't have a connection with something. Like they wanted to hear this, but they never heard it. So they created their own so that they can do it for that connection. So creating that connection with your community.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. The whole goals that you went through for someone's podcast is so important because that really does keep you going when you're starting to get
things get real
or whatever. Yeah.
You're tired and you're just like, I don't feel like releasing this episode.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Like, why is this important right now? And then you realize, oh, well, my community, or you know what? I don't want to do this right now, or because I'm showing up. So
Yeah, consistency. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nikita, and I hope we can stay connected after this. If you didn't have such a horrible experience that you won't ever want to talk to me again, but
not at all.
But we made it without any kids coming in, and
there you go.
Success. Success, and I appreciate your time. And so I think we should just head out. And thank you.
All right, thank you again. Y'all have a great day.
Can you tell me again where people can find you one last time?
Yeah, so then on Instagram, it's JourneyGurl Magic Productions, and girl is spelled with a U. And then my website is JourneyGurlMagicProductions.com. And then my email is hellojourney@JourneyGurlMagic.com.
All right. Thank you so much. And I will. All right.